Greetings, weary travelers. We bid thee welcome to the penultimate edition of our mighty run through Walt Simonson's Mighty Thor. Dan, we are nearly to the conclusion here. We have 8 comics to review for you today. We're going to be doing the Baldur miniseries, and then we're going to be doing 4 more issues of Thor. And then after that, there are 8 total issues of Mighty Thor left, and that's it. That's what we got. So it's only taken us 1.5 years to get this far, but here we are. And Dan, welcome back to the program, sir.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I missed you.
I missed you too, Dan. Let's go ahead and jump straight away into stuff. So we've got he's got all his hair. We've got the Baldur miniseries, which was written by Walt Simonson and drawn by Sal Buscema. And in fact, if memory serves, I think Buscema drew everything that we're talking about today.
Yeah, Buscema started in the last trade. I think it was split up between half Simonson art, and then Buscema takes over halfway through the last trade that we did.
Yeah.
So I think he, for the most part, draws the rest of Simonson's run, and I'm a big Buscema fan. As much as I like Simonson, I like both of them a lot, so I didn't really have a problem with his art in here.
I may have said this on the last show. If I had not read that someone besides Simonson drew this, I would not have known it wasn't Simonson. I'm not saying that they're both identical. I guess what I am saying is that I don't tend to notice things like that unless, because I'm not an art guy, unless they are drastically different. What I'm saying is I think that it is very consistent art-wise. He's got the same sorts of sensibilities for this kind of fantasy world. I think it is the same kind of amount of detail and stuff, and I think that the coloration is exactly the same, and that's kind of helping it to not feel jarring. So like when, I mean, maybe you immediately noticed even before you knew, but like for me, I had to look. I was like, oh, it's not the same art. Okay.
No, it definitely is very consistent stylistically. I mean, just because I've read a lot of Buscema stuff, like
yeah.
he drew like a bunch of Spider-Man stuff that I really like. And Buscema has this very specific way of drawing faces in people's teeth. They're kind of elongated. So whenever I see that sort of face, I'm like, oh, it's definitely Buscema. But, you know, I agree with you. Like, he fits in very well into this run, and I appreciate him being here. I like a lot of the artwork in this quite a bit.
Do you know, and I've not read up on this, do you know why that happened?
I'm not sure, actually.
Okay.
I would imagine it might be because Simonson started doing some other stuff at Marvel too, like co-writing X Factor with his wife. I think he drew X Factor with his wife for a while. That's why they cross over.
That would explain the crossover. I wondered about that because I didn't know if this was still like early days of Claremont X-Men, wasn't it? Or was that a little bit later?
Started in '75, and we're at 86 here. So
we're at 86, so he was already way into
9 years into his run.
I forgot how long.
Like, this is when all the books started spinning off.
Yeah.
From Uncanny X-Men, when X-Men blew up and became really popular after like Dark Phoenix Saga and Claremont Burns run. So yeah. And Simonson co-created Apocalypse with his wife too. He's responsible for that, all that sort of stuff. So he was definitely busy at Marvel after getting a lot of notoriety with this Thor stuff. So I would imagine he was probably busy doing other things. But
okay, well, first of all,
the writing's still very consistent.
Yeah, well, first of all, I always forget how far back Claremont goes. I'm always like, Claremont's 20 years, but I wasn't doing math, of course, mid-70s. But I didn't know that about Apocalypse. That's cool. I didn't realize that Simonson had his feet that deep into X-Men.
Yeah, he's having a good time at the films lately. He's getting to see, a movie based on his Thor run, and Apocalypse is going to be the big new X-Men villain, so he must be just ecstatic about seeing all the stuff he created adapted on the screen.
I'm sure, yeah. Well, let's go ahead and jump into the Baldur thing. The first thing I want to mention about it is that it's collected differently in this big giant tome thing. And
it's collected better in yours, I have to say.
You know what? I don't know if I agree with that. Having read it now, I thought that, and then I read it, and I'm conflicted about it, and we'll talk about it here in a second. So, of course, I'm sure everybody watching this has probably watched our earlier videos. But of course, I'm reading this giant Thor omnibus. It's amazing. But if you get this and you read it, you want a tabletop. Because this afternoon I was at a library and I couldn't find a good tabletop to sit at. that didn't have much stuff all over it. So I was sitting in a big chair, and I was reading it like this, and my back is still not feeling quite right. So anyway, the way it's collected here, it puts things in chronological order. So you get the first Baldur issue right before Thor descends into hell, because he takes Baldur with him, and there's a bunch of discussion about whether or not Baldur is going to go, and he's being manipulated by Carnilla? No.
Yes, Carnilla.
Thank you. There's going to be a lot of that. This, by the way, just
a lot of names.
Just fair warning. There's a lot of names. There's a lot of new people that I wasn't familiar with prior to this. Anyway, so Carnilla, the Norn Queen, and him are together now, and she tries to manipulate him by keeping information from him to not go there, and to not go with Thor into the realm of hell. And she's not. She doesn't have any motivation for that other than she's afraid for his life. So even though she's being really manipulative, she has, kind of like she has motivations that you can sort of appreciate. Anyway, so then. In this, the way it's collected is you get that, and then you get the Hela stuff, and then you get 2, 3, and 4 all together because of the miniseries, because it's all kind of one story. When I was reading this for last show, I actually read the first issue of the Baldur mini in the middle of all that while I was going, because I didn't realize that yours was collected differently until we reconvened, and I learned that. Now that I've read it again, and I read them just all together, it is one big story, and it's one, complete, cohesive tale. And to have anything interrupting it, even reading it out of sequence, I think is somewhat problematic. I actually kind of am glad that I read it this way. The big thing is, with something like this, when it's so expansive, and there's so much detail for this world, it becomes very difficult to know what people are going to remember when you start finally calling back to things, when you set stuff up and then you pay them off. So, you set up this sword that can fight by itself, we're told, which is fascinating, and that you cannot be defeated if you're wielding it. And then you read, and it's pretty much just set up in that first issue, and not a lot is done with it yet. Then you read the Hela stuff, and then you come back to it. I don't know that you're not going to forget all about that sword, for example. So I kind of liked getting it all together. There's not really a right way to do it, Dan. I think that honestly, I'm kind of glad I read that first issue twice. That's what I'm getting at.
No, fair enough. I think it's definitely good to have at least the last 3 issues of the series together.
Yes.
Because like you said, that's all one cohesive story, and I don't know. It was a little strange for me because the way we read it, I was already done with the Hela stuff, and then to go back and have a tale from before those events, and then right after that progress to directly after that big Hela event, even though the trade began with events before it, it was a little strange for me. But I was able to keep it pretty much all straight together in my head, I think.
Yeah, I guess I just think that it's easier to kind of read it as nonlinear storytelling, where it's like once we're into Baldur's world, I mean, like you said, that goes through quite a few events, but like, it's more jarring, I think, if you're jumping between Thor and Baldur too much. Like, I think it's kind of nice to get to Baldur and go, okay, what was he doing during all this? Because after all, during the Thor stuff, he's not important enough that I really want to jump to him all that much. But then once we get to Baldur's stuff, I don't want to go back to Thor because I'm invested with him, and because between all 4 of those things, I think that he's got... I think characters around him have more of a cohesive character arc than he does. I think he's kind of the rock in this story. But like, I don't know. I sort of like I've been going back and I've been rewatching Breaking Bad. And I've been thinking a lot about nonlinear storytelling. I've been thinking a lot of the places where that show will jump into the past or into the future to inform what the story is, what we're about to see. And there are places where I find myself, where I ask myself, is the show cheating by not giving me a thing that I'm pretty sure they just now came up with, instead of giving it to me earlier. And a lot of the time I find myself going, no, it's not a cheat, because, for example, like, when we finally get Gus Fring's backstory, when he was being strong-armed by the cartel, if we'd gotten that earlier, I might not have remembered some of that stuff that happened. But when it's informing what's right in front of me, it's necessary. I need it right now. I think this is a case of that. I think that if you read the Balder, and it wasn't published that way, but I think that if you read the Balder miniseries right in the middle of all of this stuff, and you backtrack to go and find out what he was doing during all that, and then you get into all of the stuff with the frost giants and all of that, I don't know. I think it reads better.
No, that's a very fair point, because this story is all about why Balder is the perfect choice to be king.
Yes.
And we have this informing the decision that Thor had already made. So it's sort of like you said, like, we're seeing all that sort of backstory inform the decision that Thor made. Like, we were able to get, like, I think Simonson did a good enough job, because we talked at length about this in the last video, about the reasons why Balder, Loki, and Thor are all contrasting figures, and why Balder was the most fit to rule of the three of them, depending on what your perspective is. So I think there was enough there that you could decipher it, but to get it in this level of detail was very nice. And I like that. I like that point that you said, where the auxiliary characters, it's really more what the story focuses on. And I agree with you 100%. Like, Agnar and Karnilla are the two people that have character arcs in this. Yeah. And Balder is the one that propels them to change because of how, like, altruistic of a guy he is. Because we've already had Balder's character arc previously in Simonson's run. He's already got to a place where he's not going to change too much for the rest of the events of this story, really. We've gotten to a place where he's just the most heroic, awesome guy ever that anyone would want to be. And I think it's so interesting that you have, like, Agnar, he's like this really young warrior guy, like who Balder used to be, and then we have Karnilla, who's this, like, cold-hearted queen, and both of them aren't very good at what they do, but it's like Balder's past and future coming together, and him sort of, like, talking out, like, the two roles that he has played in his, well, one that he's already played in his life and one that he's going to, he doesn't know yet, and sort of like talking to Karnilla and being like, this isn't the right philosophy in which you should rule your people. You shouldn't rule through fear and despotically and treat them like pawns in a game and be paranoid that everyone's out to get you and stuff like that, because she's very much that kind of ruler, and without, explicitly saying, like, I'm gonna be king someday. Like, he just has that sort of philosophy. That's why he's so good at ruling, or he will be anyway, because we haven't really seen all that much of it yet. It's very interesting. I like that sort of contrast.
Yeah, I don't think that I would appreciate this as much if I didn't already know that he was going to be king, because it's informing that choice, like you were talking about. I love what you said. I didn't even think of that, about those two characters are in different ways showing you what that character used to be, and the reflections of his past. And it's sort of like watching somebody who has been through a whole lot of grief and turmoil, and then now is at a more like concrete and confident place in his life, so he can kind of impart wisdom to other people now. And what's really great about it is that we got to see all that. We saw him do all that. So when you're watching him dealing with Karnilla and he's teaching her something, she doesn't even realize it. And then she gets to the end, and she has been changed by him, I think completely unintentionally, right? And when you're watching that relationship, I can't help but be called back to his dealings with Loki when he was sent by Thor to go deal with Loki, and he got manipulated by Loki into going against his pacifistic views and having to fight people and stuff. And so he doesn't like what she's doing, not because she used to be not because he used to be like her so much, but because he's dealt with Loki, and she's reminding him too much of that, and and that sort of thing. And then I think that with Agnar, who, when we first see him, by the way, I didn't think he was going to be important. I didn't think I was going to care about that guy. I didn't think he was going to come to life. He came to life, and I think that he is the inexperienced, wet behind the ears, needs some on-the-job training kind of version of Balder. He reminds me a little bit of what we're told Balder was like before he became Balder the Brave. Not that we see a lot of it. Maybe we saw it before this, before this book. I don't know. But I mean, like, because he's already Balder the Brave, kind of, when the book starts. But I mean, like, he's got a lot to learn, but he's not like. He still had a career, you know what I mean? But this guy, he's just like totally brand new. And so Balder, if you haven't read the book, Balder has to teach him how to look at his surroundings and how to be not just a good fighter, but how to understand the world around him. And he teaches him the lesson of things are not always as they seem, and that's very important in this. Because every single story, I dare say every issue, almost, of this book has been about mistaken identity and has had characters that pretend to be something else that they're not. There's a lot of that kind of Shakespearean stuff in this. And so for Balder to have to teach a guy, okay, look, you see you see that cave over there? You see that big rock face? Yeah, you can walk right through that. Because our bird just did it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think one of the interesting things about Agnar, too, and it parallels kind of what Balder was when he was pacifistic, is, importantly, he doesn't want to take any risks at all.
That's, good call.
He sees that cave, and he's afraid that if he goes through that cave, what if it's an illusion that leads to someplace, that's going to kill him? What if it really isn't an illusion? There's a part where Balder... They see this big ice ravine, and Balder's like, all right, we're just going to walk over this stretch of invisible, seemingly thin air with his horse. And Agnar decides to walk around the ravine, and he ends up falling in and almost dies because he didn't take that risk. So Balder's trying to teach him, like, what it means to be a warrior, where, like, sometimes you have to make split-second decisions and things like that, too, which I liked a lot.
And isn't it interesting? Let me say this real fast. Isn't it?
Go ahead.
Sorry. Isn't it interesting to compare characters when we get away from this and we get back to Thor? To compare characters like this to Thor, who has that spirit of adventure and does nothing but risk taking and won't even allow himself to sit on the throne because he doesn't want a desk job, and he wants to always be out in the danger. And then we'll get to this later, but then what Hela does to him at the end of all that, you see, it's all coming together. So even in this miniseries, we are seeing kind of the antithesis to Thor to build toward that stuff.
Yeah, Simonson's just such a master of weaving all the themes of these stories together. It's such great stuff, and
he intimidates me. I read his writing, and I'm like, I could never write like that. Like he intimidates the crap out of me. I love it.
I know, it's very... It gives the reader a lot of credit, too.
Yeah.
Because, like we said, there's, like, a lot of names and characters going on and stuff. And if you're not paying enough attention, I don't think you'll get as much out of this as if you really study it and look at it and take everything in, because it's very dense. Like, we've talked about that before. These comics take a really long time to read.
Yeah.
Not just because the dialogue is a little bit... it has that old world kind of flavor to it, but there's a lot going on all the time, plot-wise and character-wise, which is just great. One of the things specifically that I liked about Balder, just on kind of a superficial level, is I like that I believe, I'm not 100% sure about this, but I think Balder is a Marvel creation. Like, he wasn't a Norse god, and Thor has that elemental control of thunder. I like that Balder controls the sun and heat. I think that's really cool. And he uses a sword, which is kind of the opposite of a hammer. It's precise. I don't know. It says a lot about the character, like the tools and the powers that he has. Like, he's this bright, shining light that everyone aspires to be.
That's
you know
great.
What I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and
cool.
And Thor is this, like, really bombastic, a kind of character, and that's reflected in the whole thunder thing. But yeah, like, doesn't make a lot of sense that a guy who at least would love to be pacifistic, is the bright shining light, and they Simonson later on in this deals a lot with his kind of like humble nature, and that, you know, people aspire to be him because he doesn't like gloat about it and stuff, and that's kind of reflected in that kind of idea too, that he's this example to inspire to, or to aspire to. Excuse me. I want to pull back for a second.
Sure.
I think that, because you said something that I hadn't thought of, which is Simonson somehow manages to make all these characters really distinct, and I don't have any trouble remembering who is whom, even though there are so many characters and there are so many different names, and they might not always stick with me on my brain. Would this be as easy of a read if it were only in prose?
I'm not sure.
I think I need to see these people's faces, you know, and maybe that's the difficulty that I've always had with, again, I'm pulling back a little bit. I have never been a big fantasy guy, and I'm enjoying this more than I usually do with fantasy stuff. And this whole time that we've been reviewing this, Dan, I've been trying to figure out why that is. Why am I liking this so much? Is it just, everybo's always said Simonson's really important, so I've been getting this kind of big, like, you know, kind of reverential thing of, I'm reading something important? No, it's deserving of it. I've never been big into Lord of the Rings and stuff like that in book form. I enjoy the films, okay, but like, I have a hard time keeping everything straight. And I think something like this, I don't mean everything's got to be done in a comic book if there's a lot of characters, but something about this, I don't know that these characters would come as alive for me and that it would be as easy for me to remember them if I didn't have some kind of visual component to it. This is just a gut reaction right now, but that's kind of what I'm thinking.
No, I mean, he definitely uses the medium to his advantage, if anything. Like, yeah. I think you're definitely onto something there. And, you know, you look at, you know, some of the costume designs, especially Balder, like, that's just so memorable that it's going to stick to you. Like, even if Balder didn't even have a distinct personality, I'm going to remember that guy just based on how cool his armor looks, you know? Like, that's definitely a thing going on here.
Oh, and Malekith, like,
so
imagine just reading a description of Malekith.
Yeah, you'd be like, I can't really picture that in my head, you know?
Yeah, okay, so he's like those guys in TOS that are right on one side and white on the other side, but other than that, he's got a big sun on his chest. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about something with Balder. You were talking about the whole sun thing, and I was confused about how and why he was just now discovering this. There's like this kind of throwaway line about like he was training and then suddenly he discovered he could do this, and I don't really understand that, because he is a god, and I thought all these gods had a power set that they always had, and I don't understand that.
Yeah, to be honest with you, I'm not sure about it either. Okay. I haven't read a ton of things with Balder in it before this. So it might be the kind of thing like he appeared in a you know, Jack Kirby Stan Lee Thor comic that I just haven't read, where he has those powers and then he was the pacifist, so he lost it and then he got it back or something like that.
But the thing
like,
is,
that would make sense to me.
It would, but that's not how it reads. The way it reads is he's like, oh, isn't this cool? I can warm things. Like, he's like, I'm an oven now. You know, he seems very excited about this new thing he has that he seems to have just somehow developed because he was training for a mission. I gotta be honest with you, that is a criticism I had of this, because I was kind of hoping that maybe you read something I missed or something, but the way it read to me was, well, he's Karnilla is, and we'll explain all this in a little bit for people that haven't read this. There's this whole thing with the frost giants. Karnilla has been turned into a bird, and she is freezing to death. And he discovers this at the moment that she's freezing to death. And it's like, oh, now I'm gonna warm her up because I have these powers. That seemed a little easy to me. You know what I mean? It seemed a little contrived. Oh, now he's got these powers because he needs them right now. I felt somewhat, but to a lesser degree, the same. We'll talk about this later, about the whole Thor's hammer used to be able to time travel thing, and it has residual time travel powers in it because he needs it to have that right now. All of that seemed a little contrived to me. Both of those things kind of bugged me a little bit.
Yeah, the Thor hammer thing, like they said in the comic, has precedence. Like, he's been able to time travel with the hammer before, in like and it's really even more contrived in the issue that it happens in Jack Kirby's run.
Oh, okay,
it's just
okay.
kind of,
but I don't know, the whole, well, I used to be able to do this, but now I can't, but maybe it's got residual time traveling. I don't know.
That's totally fair. That he stretched it a little bit.
He's fudging a bit, yeah.
Yeah.
I just want to have some perspective. It ain't perfect. That's all I'm saying.
No, I definitely agree. I think it's very telling of this book where he has contrived things like that happening. But when I was reading this, I was totally rolling with it. I was like, this character stuff is awesome. Balder has these cool sun powers now. Like, this is awesome. I'm totally rolling with this. Like, if I stop to think about it, of course, I'm going to be like, okay, yeah, that's a little contrived. But, like, the story had me so wrapped up that I didn't... We say that often about things that we really like. Like, if the piece sells you on the world that it exists in, and it has rules, and it's consistent with them, and you feel like you're invested in the characters and they're doing interesting things, like, you're going to let things like that slide. Those flaws become a little bit more obvious when the writer doesn't sell you on all of the things that I mentioned previously.
Yeah, you may not fully ignore it.
That's like the one flaw in the really good things that he's doing here.
Yeah, but I mean, like, yeah, when the thing is working, you can forgive that stuff, and
exactly.
But boy, if it ain't, they're a lot more glaring, right? Like, that's and I will say that I was not as wrapped up in this as I was the previous arc. I liked it. I enjoyed it. I don't get as excited about the Balder stuff as I do with the Thor stuff, but I was surprised that I liked it as well as I did, because I wasn't really looking forward to this part. When I found out that Balder had a miniseries, I was like, that's going to be boring. And then it wasn't, and I was pleasantly surprised about that. I also really enjoyed how much we got to learn about this world through this stuff. It didn't feel like we were going someplace else. I still felt very firmly planted in the Thor world, and all of the Jotunheim stuff I thought was really good, because we haven't really dealt with much of the Frost Giant stuff in this, and I thought it made perfect sense that this is when they choose to strike. I liked that the Odin disappearing thing informed all of this, so it's not like out in the ether. It's not, and now we're going to go follow Balder for a while. No, it's like firmly cemented in the events of what we just read. It's important stuff. I like that there's not a lot of cool politics stuff like we had earlier with regards to Loki and taking over the throne and all that stuff, but you do get a little bit of battle strategy stuff with the Jotunheimians, and that's cool. So I liked all of that, and I think Utgard Loki is hilarious.
Yeah, he's awesome. And I did really appreciate getting to flesh out Karnilla and her realm in the Nine Realms too, because when she first shows up, she's a little one-note and mysterious. Like, she's kind of that, like, you know, despotic, you know, cold-hearted kind of leader person, and she just seems kind of shallow. Like, oh, Balder is like, you know, this knightly guy that looks really good, so I wanna be with him. But like, their relationship gets fleshed out majorly here, and I buy them as a couple a lot.
You need this mostly for that to work, because at first I was like, what does he see in her? And I still had that a little bit. Like I got to the end and I was still sort of like, well, he's turned her around a little bit, but I'm not real sure he would have got with her in the first place. That was the thing I wondered.
I think what it is that Balder is just so optimistic that he always sees the good in people, and he was able to see that in her when he first met her. That's the way I sort of read it.
I could see that. That's fair. Are you sure there's not also just a little bit of she's super attractive and she, you know, there's probably some of that. Yeah. No, I think she was in huge danger at the beginning of being easily mixed up with the Enchantress. Like, I'm glad that we went somewhere with her, because like, she was not that different from other characters we've had, you know, before.
Right, exactly. And I thought her realm that like is inhabited by demons and stuff was pretty interesting too. Like, I thought that was all cool
also,
stuff.
we've talked a lot about how you have to read this with a certain kind of hat on, because not really, not physically. You have to wear this with a certain kind of hat on, because if you start like holding people to your own moral values, you're going to find everybody in this reprehensible, because they're Vikings and they just have a different, you know what I mean? Like, it's a Viking-esque culture. And so one of the things I thought was really interesting. I love how far, and I feel like I feel like now, in present day Thor, I feel like finally with Jason Aaron we have gone back to that where these characters are allowed to. I mean, maybe JMS did it too. I didn't read that stuff, but I mean, I've read a few things. To some degree, I've read a few things here and there where I feel like we've had to kind of take their teeth away a little bit and kind of and kind of like reel them back and give them too much of like a now 21st century kind of morality. They live in a different time and they live in a different space. They wouldn't do that. I thought it was really cool that he went as far as to have Carnilla in this like rip out a demon's tongue for going against Balder. That was really cool. You don't actually see it happen. What I love how subtle it was, or at least I don't think you do. I like how subtle it was because she rebukes him and you don't know exactly what it is she does to him. And then a few pages later she's like, maybe if you weren't like this, you'd still have a tongue in your head. And I was like, whoa, that's awesome.
Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit more about the Viking culture stuff when we get to the crossover with X Factor, because that plays in a little bit in Thor's dealing with Angel when he finds him in the sewer. And Simonson has always had a great handle on that. We've been talking about that since the first volume, so it just makes sense that he continues that here. But yeah, Balder is a character that, before I read Simonson's run, I didn't really know what his deal was. In JMS's run, that was the first Thor thing I ever read. I really liked that, and he was already king in JMS's run, and already this like perfect dude, so I didn't really get what his deal was. Like, it was like, I don't really know all that much about this character. I don't know, like, why he's so like perfect and why he's on the throne when Thor is the son of Odin and stuff. I just was confused about all that, and getting it fleshed out here and having him as a leading man in a miniseries and having him go on this adventure, like, it made me sympathize with him a lot and really like him much more. Like, even before like, Balder has interesting things to do in Simonson's run before this, but I was never really like a fan of the character until this miniseries. Like, I really think he came alive and came to his own with this. I really like that this miniseries specifically. I think
when we
really good.
Started this whole thing, you made a big deal about how much you like Balder, and you have to get to this.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I do think that I was immediately sympathetic toward him. I didn't find him incredibly interesting to read about, but I was incredibly sympathetic toward him early on when he had that whole being forced to go against his pacifism thing. I thought that was incredibly sad. So I think Simonson did a really good job of giving me a reason to get on board with him. And again, we get to see him become this, this really firmly grounded character when he's in a really bad place mentally, early on.
Yeah. And you mentioned his ability for, like,
excuse me,
this is outside the miniseries, but the first issue we have after the miniseries in this trade is him taking the throne for the first time, and he refuses to sit on Odin's throne. Because he doesn't think that anyone is worthy to take the Allfather's place, and he doesn't view himself on that same sort of level. Like, he says he'll rule Asgard, but not from the same throne as Odin, because he doesn't view Odin as an equal, which I thought was really interesting. Like, that's the total opposite of what Thor and even, Loki and even Thor would have done. Like, Thor, if he had taken the kingship, and we've seen him in the future in things, obviously under the pens of different writers, like Jason Aaron in the future, Thor taking Odin's throne, he's sitting on it, and he's ruling Asgard, and Loki's all about sitting there. That's what he wants the most. But Baldur's not, he doesn't revel in the power like either of them would. Like, I think Thor is obviously a more noble character than Loki, but I think he is somewhat susceptible to using power in not the best way possible, right? Like, we've seen him, he rushes into situations a lot. He's the guy, like we said, that's adventurous, and he likes to hit things. And you put the monopoly on violence that government provides, and you put that guy at the top of it, it's not going to be the best situation. You know what I mean?
Maybe I'm reaching when I say this, because I don't know that I'm gleaning this from a lot of what I've read, but you made me wonder something about his psychology. I wonder if perhaps Thor isn't ready to come right out and admit certain fallacies that he has, certain limitations, and he's constantly, I'm wondering if he's not laying this idea on too thick. He is constantly saying, I don't want to sit on the throne because I want to keep adventuring and I can't give up the adventurous lifestyle. And there's a lot of truth to that. But I wonder if he's not thinking exactly what you're talking about. I wonder if Thor isn't also saying, and I know that I wouldn't be best for the throne precisely because I don't want to give up that adventurous lifestyle. So it's a subtle difference, but maybe it's not so much of, well, I can't give up that to take the throne. Maybe it's more of, because I love that so much, I'm not the right guy for the throne. I think those are different.
Exactly. And I love that, you know, the characters are so nuanced in this that we can have these sorts of discussions about their motivations. Like, I think that you're definitely right. Like, Thor talking about the adventurous lifestyle, like, that's sort of the excuse he uses with, like, the pals he goes around adventuring with, right? Yeah. Like the Warriors 3 and Sif and stuff. Like, you know, that's a palatable reason for them somewhat, for him to not take the throne, rather than, you know, Thor, a guy that's all about being strong and you know, manly and taking life by the reins and doing whatever he wants. Admitting a flaw and a fallacy is got to be something for him that is very hard, you know?
Well, and also it's calculated. I mean, maybe with the stature, maybe somebody did build a Thor statue, I don't know. With the stature that Thor has, maybe he also thinks that it isn't a prudent idea to start coming out and admitting things like that in case he were to ever have to take the throne. You know, maybe the idea is that like it's not a good idea for leaders to just constantly go around whining about what's wrong with them. And you know, he needs to look strong. So I mean, you know, some of it might be an arrogant thing, and some of it might be a practical thing. I don't know, it's layered, it's complicated, and the more I'm thinking about it, I think some of that really isn't maybe in the book.
Yeah, it's very interesting, and that scene in general, I think, is one of my favorite scenes in the book. And you know, after that, we kind of detour into just fun Thor team-ups, which is fine with me. I had a lot of fun with, like, Thor teams up with this guy that is clearly Judge Dredd, but they couldn't get the rights to use Judge Dredd. That's exactly what I was going to say.
No, he is not Judge Dredd. He is a parody of Judge Dredd. He is the goofiest... Okay, so last time we had Frog Thor. This is sillier by about 5 times than Frog. He's this guy who calls himself.
Even factor into this story.
And the frogs show up. Yeah. So he's the not that they like show up in mass or anything. It's one scene. It's a cameo. But they are. I mean, this guy, he calls himself the Justice of Peace. He comes from the future. He comes from a place called Brooklynopolis. Which is hilarious. And he shows up, and I mean, like, I gotta say, this got almost too goofy to take seriously. And when, like, even more so than the frog thing. Because with the frog thing, when Thor goes up against Loki and he's a frog, I'm totally with it. This guy, as soon as it got serious, I started questioning things he did when he got there. Because this guy comes from the future. And by the way, I'm like, well, I guess with the time travel thing, Simonson is coming right out and saying, that future probably isn't happening. I sure hope not. That's goofy. He's talking about World War VII?
Yeah.
So he shows up, and the first thing he does is he starts punishing jaywalkers with some kind of, like, science-y spell that makes it so that they can never jaywalk again. Like,
yeah, he has a DNA gun that makes you unable to commit crime when he shoots you with it. It's awesome.
It's crazy. Well, what I wondered is if this guy only has 24 hours to do what he's going to do because he's going to get sucked back in the time stream because there's some kind of, like, 15-year time thing where, like, these 15 years just happen to be the time where the most time travel has happened and where it's harder to get out of and change anything. Hilarious. Apparently, and by the way, I liked the kind of tongue-in-cheek idea of the late 20th century is the worst time to time travel because of all of the Marvel time travel stuff that's happened. That's hilarious. Yeah. But anyway, so, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. This guy is like, oh, I've only got 24 hours to stop this horrible thing from happening. I'm going to waste my time stopping jaywalkers. No, that's ridiculous.
I kind of loved how ridiculous it was. Just, like, he's just such a like stickler for like not letting people get away with crimes that even with a limited time budget, he's like, must stop jaywalkers.
Oh my god,
like,
yeah, it's hilarious.
He's completely ridiculous. I can't disagree with that, but I just thought it was really funny.
It's almost too ridiculous to even begin to take seriously, but I enjoyed it. You know, it's What was that thing? It wasn't a puddle jumper. What did he call it? It was like a something hopper. He's got this like time travel device that had the stupidest name.
Oh yeah, it's like his time jump scooter thing.
Yeah. Anyway,
and combine that with the fact that they brought back Thug Thatcher of all people from the Stan Lee, Jack Kirby Thor stuff.
Yeah. So there. So suddenly we
awesome
have a sequel.
Thug Thatcher is the best name for a supervillain ever. His first name is Thug.
As soon as he goes, "Call me Thug," I was like, really? And then Thor recognized him, and then it turned out that it was a sequel to a story where he tried to kill Jane Foster, and now he's trying to kill Jane Foster again because he wants revenge for Thor putting him away. And I was like, oh, this is a sequel to a thing that's happened. That's crazy. I did really like the idea of... here's how a mortal man could wound Thor. That was the thing I took away from this, was because as soon as he goes, "I'm gonna hurt Thor," I was like, "No, you're not." and then he was like, "No, here's how I'm gonna do it," and I was like, "Oh, that'd be bad." And then when he actually manages it, and because what happens is he actually manages to kill Jane Foster, and then the time travel guy gets together with Thor, and they use his hammer because it's got residual time travelness in it, like we talked about earlier, and then they're able to go back just a couple of hours to stop it. We do get this cool moment over a few panels where Thor reacts very suspiciously, might I say, in exactly the same way that Christopher Reeve Superman reacted to Lois Lane's death at the end of Richard Donner Superman. It's exactly the same thing. But it looked great. I mean, I love the way Buscema drew that. Anyway, I just want to throw that out there. That was a really fun moment. Yeah, this was to me a little throwaway. Like, I think I could have skipped this whole story and not missed much of anything, but it was fun to read.
Yeah, definitely. And then, after that, we get the team up with X Factor, which was pretty cool. That's another story that's a little bit throwaway, and we get the stuff that's sort of continued with, the guy that Sigurd Jarlson, Thor's alter ego, works for. You go and see his family, and Thor spends time with the kids, and I actually really liked those sequences with the kids. I was surprised by how much I enjoyed it. When have you ever had this reaction to something? I finished it, and I realized it wasn't going any further than just to, show Thor palling around with humans again and showing his, appreciation for mankind, but B, kind of illustrating that he is, that like Hela has done something to him, and he's getting more regular person-y. So there's that, but like my reaction to it by the end of it was, I think that was actually a little drawn out. But I didn't feel like it was drawn out while I was reading it. It was kind of weird. I finished it and I was like, oh, maybe there was too much of that. But then while I was reading it, I really liked it. So yeah, it was charming. And he used it in a way that, like, the ultimate place he was getting at with the story with the kids was all about, like, fathers and how important they are in your life, and the fact that he doesn't have one, he feels like he's lost, and he tells the kids a story about a lesson that Odin taught him.
Oh yeah, I forgot about all that.
That's very pertinent to the story that's going on at that moment, you know what I mean?
Yeah, you're right. It
all ties together and makes sense, so I liked it in that respect.
Yeah, I forgot all about that part. You're right. Yeah, because the whole reason that all that is, the whole thing that's getting at is Thor is trying to find his father again, and I like this idea of, especially because of what Hela does to him by the end of this. I really like the idea that Thor can't handle the death of his father the same way that mortals do, because he has this whole kind of monologue in his internal monologue during some really cool kind of night New York stuff, when he's saying that mortals deal with death because they must, but gods don't have to deal with death, and it's actually harder if you lose someone and you can't find them, because there's no resolution. There's no sense of finality, and the fact that we know and he doesn't, that Hela is messing with him during all of this, but Hela is on his mind during all of it. And at first, by the way, I found myself going, it's kind of convenient that he's thinking about Hela during all this and he has no idea that she's messing with him. And then I realized that the reason he's thinking about her is because, of course, she is in charge of the dead. So, and he's thinking about the dead, so it makes sense.
Right.
And that brings us all the way back to where he was when he had to fight her and all of that stuff. So, like, all of that is held together in a really tight, I think, sophisticated thematic manner of if you're immortal, what is death? What does that mean? And there's something almost perverse once you start thinking about it, about that lack of finality. Isn't it almost scarier in a way if nothing ever ends? And then you get this kind of grass is always greener thing, where those of us that are mortal wish that we could be immortal, and those of us that are immortal wish that we could be mortal. You can see the good and the bad to both, and I just love this idea of showing the negative side of living forever. And then you get to the end of it, and Hela gives, and we'll get to the X-Men stuff, but you get to the end of it, and Hela has made Thor basically mortal, but he's gonna live forever anyway. And that is a horrifying kind of notion. He's going to get ill, he's gonna get injured, but he still can't die. And isn't that the worst possible thing you could do to him? And isn't that the most appropriate thing in her revenge to do to him after what he did to her? If you'll recall the way that she got all old, but then she still was never gonna die. All of that really impressed me, especially because I'm going through all this and I'm going, okay, when are we gonna find out what Hela did? When do we finally find out what she did? I felt like he was really dragging that along, and then when we finally discovered it, it was really worth the wait.
Yeah, I agree. And it's the sort of thing where you were talking about the grass is greener thing too. Like, he has that thing done to him where he's mortal, but he has to live forever. And that's sort of a horrifying thing in one way, but at the same time, it gives Thor a chance to literally see what humans living is like. And that's something that he's always wanted, but he's always sort of, he's always kept his distance because he can't get any closer, you know?
Yeah.
And now he's able to actually get on their level in terms of, like, the illnesses, the broken bones, all of those sorts of things. Like, he to humans on an emotional way, just like he did with the kids, but it's never been in a physical way. Now he's going to experience how physically it'll be to be a human. Maybe, like, after that, if that problem ever gets resolved, which, you know, it probably will, because this is an ongoing comic that's still going on today. But, you know, that's an important lesson for Thor to learn in the long run. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Let me ask you this: Do you think?
Sure.
Do you think that Frog Thor was foreshadowing this?
Possibly, yeah, that's a good point.
Because in a way, he's already had this done to him. I mean, like, he was turned into a freaking frog, and he wasn't an immortal frog at that point. I mean, he gets Mjolnir, and then he turns into Frog Thor. But before that, and then who knows what he would have been like if he looked like that forever. But when he was actually a frog, he already got a taste of, now I'm mortal. Now I don't have these powers I used to have, and now he's human. But, you know, I mean, not entirely. I just wonder if that was a happy accident, or if Simonson did it on purpose.
Well, I mean, the frogs show up right before all this stuff goes down, so I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, I think that's what he did. I didn't think of it until just now. I think that's what he did.
Man, this is so well done. The fabric of the story is so tight.
I like this better than I did when I was reading it. And I mean, I still really enjoyed it, but I mean, I thought that this was a little bit slower and a little kind of coming down from a high while I was reading it. But then the sophistication of the way that it's plotted. Boy, every time you and I start talking about this, about 15 things that I did not come up with while I was reading it just suddenly come to me. I really, really, really enjoy this. It's really good stuff.
Yeah, it's really funny. Before we started recording, I remember both of us were saying, We don't really have all that much to say to this about this. It's just doing a lot of legwork, like working up to the big conclusion of the run, because we obviously have only 8 issues left, and now we're getting into it. And I'm like, yeah, this is a lot more sophisticated than I thought it was. And the X-Men, the 2-issue crossover that we have here, the X Factor specifically, it's the original 5 X-Men on a team. They're the Xavier graduates at this point, for people that aren't privy to what was going on with X-Men at that point. We have the Morlocks, which are these mutants that live in the sewer. They're totally ostracized. They look like, decrepit pink creature alien things.
Yeah, they're basically the homeless mutant society.
Yeah, they're kind of like the homeless people from Lethal Protector.
Yeah, but why would you downgrade them like that?
Yeah, this is so much better, but it's similar.
Yeah, why would you do that?
So we have the X-Men trying to help them, and Sabretooth has this team that for whatever reason, this probably explained in the X Factor book why they're there, but those issues aren't included there. But Thor finds them in the sewer, and it's very interesting that we have the character Angel and Thor dealing with the concept of morality. I thought that was a really cool thing for Simonson to do in here, and there's a lot of talk about what's better for Angel. Angel kind of wants to die at this point because he failed the Morlocks. Most of them have been killed, and he feels like it's time for him to go. And Thor's like, well, should I try to preserve his life? That's just because that's my instinct and I want to preserve human life, or should I give him a Viking warrior's death? Like, he's like, the conflicting things in his mind are, I used to be a doctor, Donald Blake, who's all about preserving life at all costs. And the Viking way of looking at things is, well, if you gave it your all, you lived a good life, and you're fighting for a cause you believe in, you want a glorious death on the battlefield. That's the way they all wanted to go out. That's their culture. So he's sort of conflicted between those two things. And then right after that, the thing with Hela that we were talking about before happens, where he basically becomes mortal. All really, really cool, interesting morality play sort of stuff.
Yeah, and woven together, right? Because
exactly.
to have to deal with this ethical conundrum of, should I let this person go just because he wants to, and then suddenly he's going to have to deal with his own mortality. I really like that. I also think it's kind of fun, talking about foreshadowing stuff. I also think it's kind of fun that Thor has to deal with Angel, who clearly at least looks like a little bit more of a Judeo-Christian kind of thing, and I think that they're kind of they're kind of playing with that a little bit, where it's like, here's a guy who doesn't fit into my world. How should I deal with him? And then just an issue or two before this, he was asked as the human version at a dinner table to say grace, and he respectfully declines. I love that. I thought that was really great. When he was like, yeah, I don't think I'd be very good at that.
Yeah. And then I love how elegantly Simonson wraps up this last issue that with all these themes we were discussing by quoting "The Mask of the Red Death" by Edgar Allan Poe.
Yes,
talking about him wondering if he will come to envy the dead. Very, very elegant stuff. Like, one of the things about this trade, which is weird, is it lists one issue short of that's actually collected. And before we were recording, we were talking about, I was like, you should read that last issue before we start talking about it, because it wraps up all of that stuff.
I actually had to rush it. I actually had to rush it before we got started, because like half an hour before we were about to record, I find out from Dan that there was actually an extra issue in his book. So that must have been just printed wrong.
Yeah, it's strange. On the back it says Thor 371 through 373, and then I'm flipping through, and I finished 373. I'm like, there's another issue in here. This is really strange.
And the thing is, I even was thinking while I was reading, man, how long does it take to get to the Hela thing? Because I felt like we were right in the middle of something when I was like, why would that trade end on a cliffhanger about the Morlocks? That's really strange.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't they put the other one in there? Because that can't be longer than 2 issues, right? And so I was so glad that you told me about that and that we read it, because this would have been a very incomplete discussion. Because if you don't know what Hela's doing at the end of that, half of what you just read kind of doesn't really amount to a whole lot yet. You know what I mean? Thematically, anyway. Like all of this mortality stuff is so much more interesting when you find out that that's the end game. That's where she's going with it. Yeah. So anyway, I'm glad you told me about that.
Yeah, it's, I don't know. I just going through this, I'm just really excited to kind of go back and reread this again, and it's just been such a pleasant experience. Like, there's so many things, like, I feel like you could read this run and discover something new about it every time you went back.
Oh, I'm sure.
It's that sophisticated, and the way the fabric of the story is woven is so good. And I love that Thor has a beard now. That's really awesome.
Yeah, that's fun.
He's had it since the last volume, but like, look at that cover, man. Like that's great stuff.
There's some amusing discussion about it. I'm interested to see, and don't tell me because I'm sure you know, but I'm interested to see when we get to the end of this if he's still wearing the beard, and I'm interested to see what his face looks like when he takes it off, because part of the reason he's grown it is because he's disfigured, and I would not be. I think he's still disfigured. Yes. I would not be surprised if whatever happens with Hela that inevitably gets him his powers back doesn't have something to do with why he's able to not have that anymore, because surely eventually he loses that. Because Thor's got to get his pretty face back. But anyway, yeah, man, it's such a rich, dense book, and the thing I keep coming away from is this is how you balance, and I know I've said this before, this is how you balance the silly, goofy, quirky comic book stuff with real, with real, honest to God, like, not just deep characterization, but also just like heavy ideas. Like it's all there and it all fits, and it never. I mean, sometimes it borders on ridiculous. Not just border. Sometimes it gets ridiculous. But there are places, especially with the guy from the future, I still can't wrap my mind around some of that. Where it's bordering on, I'm getting a little taken out here, but it's still never quite goes too far to the point where it doesn't feel like a cohesive world, and it doesn't feel like this rich fantasy realm. I think he's able to get away with some of that too, Dan, because it's this somewhat quirky, magical, kind of whimsical fantasy realm. Even the Earth stuff. You notice that every time, there's no accident. You notice that every time Simonson takes Thor to Earth, he finds the weirdest stuff that he could possibly deal with, because we're dealing with weird stuff on Asgard, or at least weird by our definition. And so when you go to Earth, I think it makes a lot of sense for Thor to kind of deal with some of the weird comic book Earth stuff, and it almost doesn't seem as strange in this context.
And it doesn't seem boring either. Like, it would have been such a fall from a climax like you were talking about before if it was just Thor fighting Thug Thatcher, the mob boss, for 3 issues. You know what I mean? Like, fighting like the mob and like organized crime and stuff. Like, I mean, if it's done well, anything can be enjoyable, but that's just such a step down from the epic scale that we had with, Thor riding on horses into the realm of the dead and fighting Surtur and stuff like that, like the previous stuff we had on Asgard, and even the stuff on Earth with the Casket of Ancient Winners and Malekith. Like, I definitely agree. It's cool that he's dealing with the more fantastical, like, Earth element stuff, because that's what you want Thor to do. There's other characters to deal with stuff like that. Daredevil and Spider-Man deal with the, down-to-earth kind of stuff, at least, the down-to-earth people that wear purple and green costumes and throw pumpkin bombs,
Yeah, and if you but I mean, that at least comes from science. If you have
exactly.
a character that is this powerful, he's gonna have to deal with stuff that can match him, or, as I always say with Superman stuff, or it's gotta be more of an internal conflict kind of thing, where it's about, like with Angel, where it's like, Thor didn't have any problem dispatching characters like Sabretooth, but on the other hand, if he's got kind of a moral conundrum he has to solve, then it's not about is Thor going to die? I get so sick of that with Spawn, where it's like, yeah, he's gonna make it because he could do anything. Like even if you put him in a situation where you say Spawn's in danger, no, I never believe you, and it never turns out to be true. With somebody like Superman or somebody like Thor, or even somebody like Spawn, isn't it more interesting if you put them in a situation where it's not about whether or not they're going to get out of it alive? It's a matter of what are they going to do with their powers, and what does it say about them, and how are they going to feel about it when they're finished with it? What does it do to their moral center? What does it do to their forgetting Spawn? What does it do to their to their chemical makeup, to them as a person? How does it change them? Something we didn't mention earlier when you were talking, because you were just talking about the supernatural stuff. We didn't mention that with Thug Thatcher, that he gets possessed by a parasitic life form that apparently
he's basically New 52 Doomsday.
Yeah, that is already dealt with Thor in the past. So we're actually doing 2 sequels to things in the same time,
yes.
Because this thing also wants to kill Thor for stuff that happened before, and so it combined with Thug Thatcher, they have a symbiotic relationship, and it's kind of like it's not as cool as this, but it's kind of like Venom and Eddie Brock, where like you put them together and they both have the central thing they want, which is kill Spider-Man or kill Thor. This thing is called Zaniac, which is just the funniest name for he's a Zaniac. Anyway, I could not believe that name. I was Zaniac. That's hilarious. He's zany and a maniac. He's a Zaniac. Anyway.
And he possesses a guy named Thug, which makes it 10 times better.
He's a zany thug. Zaniac. Anyway, I have nothing else to say about that. I just want to mention, I did not want to finish this review without saying Zaniac.
Yeah. That's a good point. I couldn't remember the name of it off the top of my head.
That's a good point.
There's so many
Dan,
names, like you said.
Dan, I made no point. I simply said Zaniac's hilarious.
No, but for some Thor fans who are, Zaniac fans and are privy to that information, they may want to know.
We can't leave out the Zaniac fans, Dan. That would be like if that would be like if we reviewed something that had Zax in it, and there were all these Zax fans, and we did, and we were remiss in bringing up Zax. Anyway, that's it for us, I think, unless you had anything else you want to bring up.
I
Are we
don't have
good?
anything to say. I think we fully went through this, and
oh, that was fun. Thanks, man.
Yeah, this was great. I can't wait to do the last one.
Me too, and then it's going to be a little bit sad to see it over, but Dan and I have some other things we want to do. Dan is a little bit freer this summer. You haven't seen him on the channel much lately because he has been pursuing his education. Dan is studying, I think, still political science, yes?
Yes.
So he's been just busy doing that and hasn't been able to be on the channel as much. Hoping to see him a little bit more this school year. He and I have been talking. Might be a little bit more Dan this year. Hoping there's a little more Dan this year. I hope so too. And later on, after Thor, and hopefully we can knock this out here pretty soon. We're going to try to get to some more vaults. We've got some Spider-Man stuff we want to do. We want to get back to the Venom stuff.
I want to do some flipping.
Yeah. So we got that kind of stuff. We got to make some Spider-Dan happen, and we also need to get back to some commentaries. Dan and I still have a couple of Star Wars films to do, and I'm sure there are other things that we want to do commentaries on.
Yeah, Amazing Spider-Man 2 comes out on Blu-ray in August of this year.
Early? That's insane.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so we can do the commentary on that when it comes out.
Wow. Yeah, because we did Amazing Spider-Man shortly after it came out, didn't we? And I always find doing commentaries just after a movie comes out to be fascinating because as you and I are especially with you, because you and I will start exploring things and I'll think of things that I never would have thought of otherwise, and it's fun to capture that sometimes on a podcast. So yeah, I'll take you up on that. That'd be cool. Wow, August. Jeez.
That was crazy.
It took, like, the Lego movie is just coming out this week, and that was, like, March. So
I
that's.
wonder if it has something to do with the fact that the box office for it dropped off so quickly, because it dropped off after the second weekend pretty hard.
For Amazing?
Box office was.
Yeah, you know what? That's probably what it was. And then for something like the Lego Movie, it did such big guns that they probably were stretching it as long as they could because they kept it in theaters forever. You're right, because a lot of the time, this has nothing to do with anything. A lot of the time, it'll be like directly proportionate to how long they want to keep it in the theater. So if it's doing really well, they'll keep dragging it out. That's why a lot of the time for huge like Oscar nod movies, you won't see a DVD release until much later than you would have expected to because they want to put it out in the theater again. I think that happens.
Right. Yeah. And speaking of other things that we should review at some point, we mentioned Simonson's run on X Factor with his wife. I think if we could ever get our hands on that, that'd be a
that sounds great. Let's find out if it's still in print. See if we can get our hands on it. That sounds great. I bet it is. Usually those kind of big seminal runs, Marvel tries to keep around. Can you believe there was a time where X Factor meant the original 5 X-Men? I can't get my mind around that. Like,
I know.
That sounds like X-Men to me.
I heard Peter David talking about when they offered him the book, and he's like, yeah, I get to write the original 5 X-Men? And they're like, actually, no, you get all these characters no one's ever heard of. And then he made them awesome. Yeah. I haven't read his X Factor run, but that's how it went down.
He should do.
But anyway, we're not talking about anything with Thor anymore.
We're not, but I just want to say that Peter David should write X Factor 2099. And
that would be awesome.
Anyway, by the way, I cannot wait for Spider-Man 2099. That's about to come out this month.
We get to review that in some capacity when it comes out.
Oh, yeah.
Either arc full or issues, whatever.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, I'll be doing it on New Acquisitions, but when we've got a story arc completed, we definitely got to get to that. Anyway, thanks everybody as always for watching. Dan and I can continue this conversation in our own time, and we want to we want to say thanks again. We sure appreciate you watching. We'll be back again very shortly. I'm Captain Logan,
and I'm Dan.
See you later.